podcast where people reach their goals and develop confidence one mind shift habit at a time. Let's join our host, certified coach Christina.
Hello, thank you for joining me on this episode of Conversations with Coach. I am your host, Certified Mindset and Confidence Coach, Christina Calloway. I help athletes, parents, and coaches develop the confidence they need both on and off the field of play. I have a question for you. Well, more than a question. I have several questions for you. What is the difference between a leader and a mentor? Is mentoring considered leadership? Lastly, should a leader be a mentor? Well, just in case, if you aren't sure of these answers, or maybe you want to compare your answers with that of our special guest, I invite you to stick around and share this episode because we are talking all things leadership versus mentor. You know, in today's world of social media, we are able to develop relationships with others who are thousands of miles away, such is the case for me and my special guest. I met Vincent Buggs through our professional connection on the LinkedIn platform, and I have followed him for some time. In fact, I remember when his daughter was playing soccer as a small kid and he was coaching and helping her to become the great soccer player she is today. So much so that she is attending college on a soccer scholarship. And through me following him, I have learned so much about him and learned about his passion and his new company that he's just started. Vincent Buggs is a retired brigadier general in the U.S. Army. And in case you are unfamiliar with this term, brigadier general, allow me to help. You see, in the United States Armed Forces, a brigadier general is a one-star general officer in the U.S. Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Space Force. And Vincent retired with 30 years of service in 2020, right when the pandemic hit. Since retiring, he is the founder and CEO of Embrace the Power and Power Pony Express Sports, LLC. His main goal is to guide and develop individuals as they journey on their path of self-development to achieve their sought-after desires. Already, he and I have so much in common. He earned his bachelor's in history and currently holds a master's in global history and a master's in strategic studies. One of his main projects is the Holistic Soldier. This organization works with local communities to enhance the lives of military families in all services. Each day, Vincent has one goal: to make a difference in someone's life. His motto is, embrace who you are and be a change agent for your community. Please help me welcome to Conversations with Coach, Vincent Buggs.
Hey, what's up, Christina? What's going on?
How
Hey,
are you?
I'm good. Fighting jet lag. Just got in from Germany, so it was a great trip. I ran into Ukrainian refugees while I was there, and got to speak to some of the students that are, leaving Ukraine and trying to find a new life. And as an American, you kind of have to be thankful of what you have when you run these situations. But it's glad to be here, Tampa. Whether it's raining and storming today, but hey, what the heck? I can't make it up. So how's it going?
It's going good. Well, you all might be getting the weather that we had for the past couple days. It started out this morning kind of overcast, but now the sun's coming out, which I hope that doesn't equate humidity and unbearableness. But yeah, in Georgia, you get what you get.
You do, definitely, always.
So I just shared with my audience all of your accolades and how we met, but I didn't share everything. And that's because I want you to share your story with the audience.
Oh, awesome. I'm from Bossier City, Louisiana originally, and my dad was in the military. And, it's during the turbulent times. I was born in the 60s. So, civil rights is going on. And my mom's in the South, and a lot of things have happened in Mississippi, just the neighboring state. And so, I give my mother a lot of credit and my dad, but my mother mostly is because being a young African American male, I subconsciously, and to this day, she thinks about the decisions she made. She did everything she could to relocate the family out of the South. So we went to Massachusetts, Springfield area, and then we eventually ended up overseas in Europe, where we stayed a very long time. And I think a lot of these things resonated with her because of the Emmett Tillman situation, the three young men that lost their lives in Mississippi. And she, kind of, you realize it and you stand back now that when we have time to really talk, a lot of things subconsciously played in her decision making of getting us removed from the South. So, my story is like anyone else, is that, there was challenges. My mother was young. She was a teen mom, in 19, 18 years old, and she relocated the family overseas with my dad. And then we eventually ended up just staying over there. And it was a good experience for me because I really didn't feel the pressures of segregation, racism, the integration process that took place in the 70s, the busing. So theoretically, she kind of removed us from that situation. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people would think, wow, but you get removed from that situation, but then you're in a foreign country, so you have to learn the language, and which I speak German. You had to make some modifications, and then I fell in love with, culture, the history, seeing, I'm very blessed. I got to see another culture and start to understand how things work, and it evolved into my business and the way I process lives. And you got to remember, at the time I was in Germany, they had just came out of World War II. So the whole country is destroyed pretty much. And you can still see the buildings, in the 70s, or, everything was just, still destroyed, and they're rebuilding it. But it really gave me a sense of understanding human beings transitioning in life. The Germans were transitioning from the Nazi era, and Americans were staying there, and their kids are going to school there. And just think about 20 years prior to that, or 30 years prior to that, they were actually having a war in that country. Yeah. Right. And so it helped a lot. And then we relocated back to States, and I relocated back to States, went to Georgia Southern, got my undergrad degree, and, and then got in the military and did the military thing for 30 years that I'll never get back. But it was a great experience, don't get me wrong, because it set me to understand networking. It set me to understand the importance of people, taking care of people, and the understanding of cultures, because you have to go through so many classes in the military that talk about diversity, consideration of others, gender roles, just so many things that kind of help you set you up to be a CEO. Yes. And I'll stop there.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad that you ended with that, because working with athletes, it's so much the same. They spend a lifetime of participation in their sport. And when they come to the end of it, because all good things do come to an end, and bad things do too.
That's right.
They can't identify with, well, they're next. What is my next? Who am I if I am not this athlete? And so, to your point, you develop so many skills while you were either participating in your career, such as yourself, or while you're participating in a love of a sport that you've been doing. That brings me to the question, which is tied around the subject of our conversation: leadership versus mentor.
Right.
Now, in your position as a brigadier general, that must have been a daily thing that was kind of drilled into you. So I want to ask you, too, what made you go into the military? And at some point, it was, I can get out, but I'd rather stay and make this a career and retire from it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I saw my dad do 20 plus years, and he was a Vietnam vet, and watched how his career, ended, and all the benefits and all that. So I grew up in there, seeing all that. I did not actually want to be in the military. I actually wanted to be a history professor, and I was kind of goaded into the Army by Matt Sergeant Whitfield. I'll never forget that name. He kind of goaded me into going in ROTC, and when I got in, I liked it, and I just decided to stay. And you say the funny thing about it is, there are moments in your life, in your career, where you want to get out, because there's just pressure, there's different things. And I'm going to be very clear and transparent on this, and I'm not going to pull any punches. Yeah, I had to deal with racism a little bit, confirmation bias a little bit, the good old boy system a little bit. I was coming in, and I tried to explain this to someone the other day. I said, when you really think about when I was in the military, America had just ended segregation and started integration of cultures in the 70s. So by the time I came into the military in the late 80s, early 90s, we were only 20 years removed from a segregated country. So no, it's not. And but you, but you would think a lot. Yeah, and so a lot of people are going, all right, the 70s and 80s. So you're talking 2 decades, going into your third decade of 300 years of segregation. So you're not going to change the mindset and the culture of certain individuals, because it's not the fact that they deem they're doing anything wrong, is that it is it's enrooted in them. And so predominantly in the officer corps, which was predominantly European American, it was a shift. And we talk about women in the military now as roles, evolving. Well, at that time, it was a shift of having people of color coming in the critical senior level roles and making, having a different perspective.
Right.
Because when everybody's in the same room and you have confirmation bias, if those that know what confirmation bias is, that everybody kind of, you build yourself around a group of people that think the way you do, see the world the way you do, and have their perspective. So me going in that really made a big difference in my life. It made a transition in my life, because I had to start navigating some unique waters to be successful. So, and the reason I bring that up, because that goes out to anybody that is dealing with this, or you see this as you're going up, through the ranks. And then you bring up the difference between leadership and mentorship. Leadership and mentoring. Let me tell you something. At one point, I used to put those two words together. All right. And now in my 50s, I will tell you, I look at those as two separate entities, Christina. They are not the same. 100% not the same. Leadership is a point of being able to convince people to do some things that they don't agree with all the time, but to be able to convince them to see that it is possible to do something. Mentorship is a lifelong process that you've decided that you are going to do something with a group of people or individuals, and that it is not a one and done. You mentor for life.
Right.
You lead for a moment. And I pause there.
Because sometimes people feel like when they're in a leadership position that they automatically should be mentoring others. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, if you've really gotten down the leadership part.
Right.
Because with mentoring, you're actually passing on skills. These people are coming to you because it's like, I see you as someone that I look up to in this particular area. I want what you have. Not every leader is like that. Some people have just been given the position because they met the qualifications or they knew someone, but they never took the leadership to the next level.
Right.
There is a such thing as mentoring leadership or leadership mentoring, but in and of themselves, those two words are completely separate, and I completely agree with you. Your business, because you had sent me an email some time back and was saying, hey, I'm working on something. Would you like to be a part of it? And it is the Embrace the Power. I want you to share how that all came to be with the audience.
All right. But and here's the thing where Embrace the Power came from, is because I kind of looked at my life in the military, and I kind of looked at my life growing up playing sports. You're a coach, and I do, I coach varsity sports now. And I had to step back and to touch on that leadership and mentoring. There are good leaders out there and there's bad leaders out there, and they both mentor. And some bad leaders actually mentor future bad leaders. And I look, and the same with coaching. You can have a coach that wins a lot, but he could actually also be articulating bad practices, even though he's winning. And so when I came around for Embrace the Power, I thought to myself, I said, what is the one important thing in life I love to do? And that inspire other people to be the best version of themselves. And so Embrace the Power came from that process of me going for my whole career in the military. I tried to make everyone be able to function on their own accord and give them everything I possibly could give them and leave a mark. So somebody said this to me one year, and I'll never forget this. And it's critical for everybody to hear this. He said, you've done a good job in your life is if you meet someone and you're walking on the same side of the street and they decide to cross over to the other side of the street and not speak to you, or they stop and shake your hand and hug you and tell you the impact you made in your life. You have to make a decision as a leader or as a coach. What's your legacy? How do you want your legacy to end? How do you want people to perceive you? So do you want people to come up to you when you're like 70 years old, like I'm going to be soon in 20 years, and say, hey, Coach Buggs, or General Buggs, you know what? You left a mark in my life, and you want your legacy to carry on through those people to bring more positive attitudes around you? Or do you want people to cross the street and say, that is the person I never want to be like? And so my business model was based on trying to inspire the next generation, which is my target audience, to be the best version of themselves, and then not hooked into the gender thing, not hooked into the color thing, but hooked into who are you as a person? And what do you bring to the table? When you look in the mirror every day, what do you bring to the table for society to be better? And I'll pause there.
That's excellent. We actually share a very similar mantra in terms of our business model. My whole thing is I want to teach, inspire, and encourage others daily. As a matter of fact, I get an alarm on my phone every day reminding me of that. And you're right, in terms of being a coach, there are those that you're coaching that are looking up to you, that they are watching your response when things are not going so well. Well, how is Coach Christina going to respond? Right. Or when things are going really well, how do you respond? Whether or not you like it, when you're in those types of roles, you are going to have people looking up to you. And since you are going to have people looking up to you, you might as well do it to the best that you can do it. You mentioned when you first came out about being in the military, and you were very candid about sharing some of the trials that you had to go through in terms of your promotions. And
right.
Some of that was tied to race. And share your perspective on minority-owned business, or being a minority-owned business.
Oh, wow. Great question. All right, being a minority-owned business, this is what I've seen over the years, and I had to really cultivate this, as because of my experiences are different. There are opportunities. So I'm going to just go down the line and be very transparent here. There are people that, as a culture, and so let's just talk about African Americans, and I'm going to touch on that because about my history degree. When you step back and look at it from a cultural standpoint, and I try to explain this to large groups and numbers of young minority business leaders, when you look at African Americans, even after Reconstruction, majority of African Americans were illiterate. They could not read or write. So you go 60 years until you get to the 60s. So you're at about 60 years into the 60s. You've went almost 250 years of illiteracy. And for some reason, I don't know why in African-American culture, you don't understand the same business model works in business. You have to remember that you're breaking from slavery into business from a historical standpoint. When you're a European-American, you're breaking in from either being blue collar, or you're breaking in that your parents had money, and then you're breaking into the business world. Those worlds don't add up. Yeah. So as you get into looking at it from a minority standpoint, you're talking about you're already behind educationally, you're already behind financially from financial wealth. And then the one thing that we haven't done very well in the African American community, so why minority businesses don't thrive like they should, is we don't break generational brokenness. And so what happens is in other cultures, be it Asian, Latino, one generation will suffer grossly to save money. So the next generation will build entrepreneurial businesses so that they have financial independence. Because of and you can blame colonialism. All right. I give all these different nuances, but I tell everybody at the end of the day, at some point, we can't look back and say these are all the reasons why we're not where we need to be as minority-owned business. Because Topeka, Kansas is the poster child. They were on point, on point to have Black Wall Street, to have all these things going on that were positive, and it was cut short because they were actually doing better than their European American counterparts. And so it became a problem. So that's a setback. After the 60s, every opportunity for minorities to thrive in the business world after the Civil Rights Bill was signed didn't happen. And everybody goes, why didn't it happen? It didn't happen is because you didn't have a baseline of business growing up on it. You grew up on a baseline of servitude. You haven't grown up on a baseline of entrepreneurship. And so my mother and me have this conversation, and she is like the most awesome person. She's got a PhD at 73. She doesn't mess around. But my mom literally goes, and she's right. And I wanted to argue with her a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to give her credit on this. She said, after the civil rights movement, my generation that came in the 80s, that didn't have the constraints that they had, we didn't take advantage of making it a better way. They did the hard lifting of getting the bill signed. We didn't do the hard lifting of establishing, ending generational brokenness and starting pushing towards business. We do very well as individuals, but collectively as a race, we haven't really stepped forward. So minority-owned business is a challenge because you can't get the banking you need. You have to understand credit at the gate. I'm just going to be clear. You got to understand credit at the gate, and you got to pay taxes. Yeah. And those three fundamental things that I just said, everybody would go, believe it or not, those are the fundamental reasons why most minority businesses don't last 5 years.
Right. That's
the
part, and just knowing. I agree with you as it relates to our culture falling short and missing the lesson from other ethnicities. I know that there are certain ethnicities that they actually pool their monies together.
That's right.
Someone else coming in doesn't start from scratch.
That's correct.
They actually give them the money, and it's a familial thing. It's the family, the immediate family working to help the business to be successful. It is the community part of it that helps everyone to be a success. To your point of coming through Topeka, Kansas and Black Wall Street, when we had that struggle and when it was taken away, it did something to us as a collective.
It did.
Made us feel as if, oh no, here comes slavery again. And each time it's kind of a blow and a knockback for our culture. But instead of us having a segment of it that will still say, or the leaders or the mentors in our culture that are saying that's bad, that doesn't matter, we are going to be able to work around this. And even if you were to start with just a few businesses that could get together and not have that mindset of we're competing or somebody's getting something that I didn't get, or mentality of, well, why should I pull together seed money for someone else? No one was there for me. I had to fight and scratch for it on my own.
Right.
And I think you bring up a great point in terms of the mindset shift that does need to happen in order for our minority-owned businesses not to fail within, what is the average for just businesses overall? In the
3 years, man. 3 years. I mean, you need to survive 5 years to see profit. But because they don't have the financial backing, 3 years, most of them are out of business by 3 years.
Right.
because they're actually living off of what their profits they're making. They're having to live off that, which is the problem. You need to be able to pay yourself a salary
Right.
and put the rest of the money back into the business.
Right. And that not just isn't a cultural thing, but that last statement that you made, pay yourself a salary, that is a point that is missed by a lot of business owners, minority included. I'm not sure where it got misstated that being in a business, because the term small business really doesn't apply to you and I, because small businesses, you have a minimum number of 500 employees. Well, I don't
Right.
have a minimum number of 500
Oh,
employees.
neither do I. I think I got 8.
Right, I wish. It's more of the micro business. That's us, and we can't get micro businesses started because of our mentality of not wanting someone else to have what we didn't. And you brought up a very good point. There are plenty of cultures that are scraping, and it might go through a whole generation where they don't have anything, so
Right.
that the life of the generation in the independent businesses are birthed. And that leads me into how do we cultivate, in this new era? Like, what do you suggest?
Oh, okay. So to cultivate a new era, I'm going to push it back to that. We got to go back and teach the past to make everyone understand. See, and I always tell everybody this: X amount of number of slaves were sent to America, and I love always using this analogy in my history classes I teach. I said, out of that, if it's 300, 410,000, whatever the number is, I had it at the top of my head, but right now I forget. Whatever was that ended up breaking off from the mass number that was shipped over here, people that were shipped over here from Africa, a small percentage the large percentage that did come to North America, somebody had to survive harsh treatment and years of struggle for Vince Buggs to be standing in front of this classroom, Vince Buggs to be a general, Vince Buggs to be whoever Vince Buggs is. That plays in the back of my mind on a regular basis. So when I'm going through hard times and cultivating what you talk about, the new era, I remind them that even if you were Irish, Italian, you're Black, you're whatever, German, whatever your ancestry is, there was a struggle, and Native Americans, who I really feel bad about, but there was a struggle, and somebody survived a struggle for you to be here. So you owe them an opportunity, and I think that's a missed mark that we don't teach. We look at like it's easier to take a handout. When you're talking about cultivating a new era of young minority businesses, or just in general, people in general, you need to start to step back and look and say, you know what, I owe somebody something other than myself. Instead of having this we look at Steve Jobs, we look at all these different guys that are on TV, these one percenters, and everybody's like, oh, I want to be like them. Steve Jobs didn't pay child support, people. That's what you want to be like. You want to be like this person that didn't do this person that did. You want to just ruin. You don't want to take somebody else's technology and save it for yourself. And that's somebody on Facebook will leave that alone. But I said that's not a role model. A role model is you want someone to look at someone that's grinded from the bottom, and then they made sure they gave back to the community. And so what I always tell people all the time is, if you're going to cultivate a new era of business owners or young business leaders, then start teaching them a little bit about the past of, like, where do you come from? What are you about? And what do you see yourself doing? Because it becomes down to legacy.
Yep.
And I told my daughters this all the time. I tell my daughters this all the time. The last thing and the only thing I care about is me leaving them a legacy. And then when they talk about my eulogy, and the only thing I want them to say is, my dad he had his moments, but my dad was a good man. He was a provider. He was a protector. Those are the things that we kind of got to cultivate the new cultures in. And we're not getting there. I think we're missing marks in schools because we don't talk about certain cultural things. But what also, you hit on a key thing. People come from another country, and I see it happen here in Florida all the time. They band together and they make businesses work for 2 generations forward. Yeah. But one generation doesn't care. They're cleaning toilets. Yeah. No pride, no ego. Yeah. They're going to clean toilets and say, this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And they're all on board with it. Yes. To make sure the next generation owns 9 businesses that are cleaning companies. And it's funny is that, when you think about coming out of just out of slavery or everything else with African Americans, you're not getting that top lesson, and you're not getting it in school. Even if you go, it doesn't matter. And I tell people this: I don't care if you go to a school that's predominantly minority or predominantly mixed or whatever. You're not overall. You're not getting it as a culture, because capitalism is not taught in the African American community to understand how capitalism works. You understand the definition of capitalism. You understand the difference of democracy and socialism and all that. But do you really understand capitalism? We, as for the new era, that's something that we need to be teaching and saying, this is how the capitalist system works, which I teach in my class. This is how you, as a 17-year-old student, this is how you need to plan your future. Because you got to begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
You're going to be 50 one day. You're going to be 50, and you want to be able to retire on your own conditions after 50. A lot of people can't. I mean, I see 70-year-old people struggling right now, working.
Yes.
Because they never understood the capitalistic system. And I'll pause there.
That's exactly right. In terms of what you're talking about, that generational poverty mindset that does hinder many in our community. And for those who have found a way to be successful, is incumbent upon us to lead and to mentor others who aspire to be
Right.
business owners. Not everybody's going to be teachable. We understand that.
Teachable or coachable.
They're not gonna be open to doing things that are contrary to either how they've seen it,
Right.
or the idea that they have to create their own business. Because I'm sure you've experienced this too when working with individuals that have an idea. Very few times do people come forward and say, it doesn't matter, this is my idea. However, I'm not going to put my idea over the success and the impact that I want to make.
Right.
When you have a person that has that mindset, you're going to be able to lead them and mentor them to the levels that they want to get to. When you've got someone that's clenching and holding tight to their vision, to their idea, their dream, and they are completely not open, they're closed off from anything, that's going to be an individual who will probably fall in those 3 years that we were talking about being in business. They're
Yeah.
not going to survive. No one, as you mentioned earlier, no one knows everything.
Nope.
However, you sharing what you know, me sharing what I know, someone else sharing what they know, on the collective, that is how we keep climbing where it is that we want to go. We could talk forever. And I'm going to have you come back because I want to continue this conversation and get into some other things too that we didn't have quite the time to do.
Oh, no worries.
But I issue a call to action for everyone, all of my viewers that are watching. And if you want to connect with Vince and learn more about, maybe you are a business, a small business or a micro business, and you're just getting started and it maybe not be going like you want it to. Here's how you can reach out to him and he can help you. He actually has his own podcast, which I hope to be on very soon.
You will. Hey. So since we're on here, let's get this over right now. Christina's gonna be on my podcast. So now, hey, I'm not gonna pull a Lizzie Graham and say you can hold me to that. Then change my mind. Yeah, okay. We got this.
Okay, y'all heard him. I got all my witnesses now.
That's right.
You don't have to worry about writing this information down. It is going to live in the show notes. And this is how you can connect with him on his website. You may know of some individuals who, for his website, that would be great for his website. Let him know and have those individuals to follow him on his social media as well. Vince, I do one thing with all of my guests before I let them leave, and that's my final thoughts. When it comes to business, cultivating a new era, being a minority-owned business, what is the one mindset shift you want to leave with everybody?
The one mindset shift I want to leave was you got to leave your imprint in history, and you may have to change who you are And I don't mean that in a negative way. You may have to change who you are to be successful in the future. And King House is a good friend of mine who's on social media, always brings up sometimes you may have to get a haircut. Maybe you have to get a suit. Maybe you have to do something. You can't wear jeans to everything. Your call to action to be who you are is a great thing to be an individual. But you got to remember, business is a team sport, and you can't do it by yourself.
Absolutely. You cannot do it by yourself. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with the audience. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience and I'll be right back with you. And there you have it. This was a great episode talking about lots of things: leadership, being a mentor, business. I appreciate you all so much for joining me. You know where to find me on all of my social media because you already do. And I want to encourage you to head on over to my website, schedule your free clarity call so that we can get that mindset shift going on in you to help you reach your goals. As always, I appreciate you so very much, and I will see you next time on Conversations with Coach. Goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Coach. Please be sure to follow Coach Christina on all of her social media platforms. And remember, life is only as good as your mindset.